Every morning, the woman arrived before anyone else. The building was still quiet when she unlocked the side door and stepped inside. The long hallway smelled faintly of old wood and polish. She moved slowly, carefully, as if trying not to disturb the place itself. To most people, she was just someone who worked there, someone easy to overlook. Few knew her name and even fewer cared to ask. She dressed simply every day. Her clothes were always clean but plain, the kind that helped her blend into the background. She tied her hair neatly and kept her eyes lowered when passing others. It wasn't fear that made her quiet. It was habit. Over the years, she had learned that staying silent made life easier. The institute was known for its high standards. Students came from many places, dreaming of success, hoping to be seen and praised. Teachers walked the halls with confidence, speaking loudly, correcting mistakes without hesitation. Music filled the rooms from morning to evening. Piano notes, sharp and soft, floated through the air like constant reminders of ambition. The woman heard all of it. She heard every scale, every wrong note, every rushed performance. Sometimes she paused in the hallway for a second longer than needed, listening. Her face never showed much, but her eyes often softened when the music flowed smoothly. No one noticed these small moments. To the teachers, she was invisible unless something went wrong. If a door was left open, they blamed her. If a chair was out of place, they pointed at her. Their words were not always cruel, but they were careless. They spoke as if she were not standing right there. She wouldn't understand. One of them once said when discussing a complex piece of music, glancing in her direction. Others laughed lightly. The woman said nothing. She simply nodded and continued with her work. Some students copied the teachers without thinking. They whispered when she passed. A few smiled politely, but most ignored her completely. To them, she was part of the building, like the walls or the floors, always there but never important. What no one knew was that she had chosen this silence. Years ago, she had lived a very different life. Back then, people listened when she entered a room. Back then, music was not something she heard from the hallway. It was something she lived inside. But those days felt far away now, like a dream she once had and slowly woke up from. She never talked about her past. Not because it was painful, but because it no longer felt necessary. Life had taught her that titles fade and applause disappears. What stayed was the person you became when no one was watching. Late one afternoon, the building was louder than usual. A group of teachers gathered in one of the larger rooms, discussing an upcoming student performance. Their voices carried down the hall. The woman was nearby, organizing chairs, moving quietly as always. One of the teachers noticed her and smirked. "She's always around," he said casually. "I wonder if she even knows the difference between these pieces." Another teacher chuckled. "Maybe she plays too," she said, clearly joking. The woman felt their eyes on her. She kept her head down, pretending not to hear. Her hands tightened slightly around the chair she was holding, but she continued working. The teachers laughed, not realizing how close they were to the truth. To them, she was just a humble woman with no story worth hearing. They saw her silence as weakness, her simplicity as lack of ability. As the day went on, students filled the rooms. One piano stood uncovered in the center of the hall, its polished surface catching the light. The woman passed by it several times. Each time, her steps slowed just a little. The piano was old but well cared for. She could tell by the way the keys sat, by the way the lid rested. She stopped once when no one was looking, just for a moment. She lifted her hand as if to touch the keys, then pulled it back. A small smile appeared on her face, gone just as quickly. She straightened herself and walked away. In another room, the teachers continued talking. One of them complained about students lacking confidence. "They freeze when they're asked to perform," he said. "They should be forced sometimes. That's how you learn." The word forced hung in the air, unnoticed by everyone except the woman, who heard it from down the hall. She finished her tasks and prepared to leave for the day. As she reached the door, she heard someone call out. One of the teachers waved her over. "Wait," he said. "We need help setting up tomorrow." She nodded and returned without a word. As she moved chairs and adjusted stands, the teachers continued their discussion as if she weren't there. They spoke about talent, about effort, about who deserved to stand on stage and who didn't. The woman listened quietly. There was no anger in her heart, only understanding. She knew how easy it was to judge from the outside. She had done it once herself long ago. As the evening light faded, the building slowly emptied. The piano remained in the hall, silent now, waiting. The woman glanced at it one last time before turning off the lights. She did not know that soon her silence would be broken. She did not know that the same people who overlooked her would soon place her in the center of attention. For now, she walked home as she always did, unnoticed, carrying a story no one had ever asked to hear. And in that quiet walk, there was a calm confidence. Not the kind that needs to be seen, but the kind that waits patiently, knowing its time will come. The next morning, the institute buzzed with energy. Students hurried to their classes, carrying books and sheet music. Teachers moved from room to room, checking schedules and correcting mistakes. The woman arrived at her usual time, opening the side door quietly and stepping into the familiar hallway. Her eyes followed the notes drifting from the practice rooms, soft and fast, clashing and blending. She paused only for a moment, then continued her work, just as she had done every day. Today, however, the air felt different. A small group of teachers gathered near the large piano in the central hall. They were laughing and talking loudly, their voices carrying down the corridor. One of them waved toward the woman as she walked past, calling her name. She stopped politely, unsure why they wanted her. "We were just wondering," one of the teachers said with a grin. "If you can play. You never have, right? Everyone says you're quiet, but maybe you hide some hidden talent." The other teachers chuckled, clearly thinking it was a harmless joke. The woman looked down at her hands. She had never hidden anything. She had always kept her life private, but now it seemed they were trying to test her. She did not speak immediately. Her silence was mistaken for hesitation or fear. "Come on," another teacher urged. "Just sit for a few minutes. We just want to see what you can do." The students passing by stopped for a moment, curious. They knew the woman worked in the building, but they had never seen her do anything remarkable. Some whispered to each other, wondering if she could even play at all. A few smirked, anticipating an awkward moment. The woman glanced at the piano. Its polished wood gleamed in the morning light. She could see the keys, familiar yet untouched. A small part of her wanted to ignore them, to continue her work and remain invisible. But another part, the part she had kept quiet for years, felt a stirring. She knew this moment would come eventually, though she had not expected it to happen in such a public way. She stepped closer. Her hands hovered above the keys. The teachers exchanged glances, clearly confident they were about to witness something amusing. A few students laughed quietly, not wanting to miss the show. "Just a simple tune," one teacher suggested. "Something easy. Nothing too serious." She nodded, still silent. Her fingers touched the keys lightly at first, almost as if testing the air. The first notes were soft, delicate, yet perfectly in tune. The laughter stopped. The whispers faded. Everyone realized something was changing in the room. She began to play more confidently. The sound filled the hall, rich and expressive. Her hands moved with precision, each note deliberate and alive. The music was not just technical. It carried emotion, depth, and a sense of understanding that could only come from years of practice and love for the instrument. The teachers, who had expected a simple, clumsy performance, now looked shocked. A student near the doorway pressed a hand against their mouth, unable to hide surprise. Another leaned forward, eyes wide. No one moved, no one spoke. The hall seemed to shrink around the piano and her playing. Even the morning sunlight, falling across the keys, seemed to pause in awe. The teachers shifted uncomfortably. Their joke had turned into something real and powerful. They tried to recover, pretending to look busy, but their faces betrayed them. They had underestimated her completely. The woman played without hesitation, without seeking approval. Her eyes were focused, her expression calm. It was as if the music came from somewhere deeper than herself, a place that could not be judged or mocked. Minutes passed, though it felt like moments. The melody rose and fell, soft and then strong, simple yet intricate. She did not rush. She did not falter. Each note was exactly where it needed to be. The teacher's smiles faded. They began to feel something unfamiliar, respect mixed with embarrassment. Finally, she finished. The last note lingered in the air, echoing softly against the walls. Silence followed, complete and heavy. No one clapped at first, unsure if they should. The woman closed her hands slowly and looked down. She did not smile. She did not seek recognition. Her performance had been for herself, and it had been perfect. One teacher cleared his throat. I didn't expect that, he said, voice low. We thought you were just, well, quiet. The woman looked up briefly, meeting his gaze for the first time. There was no anger in her eyes, only understanding. She shook her head slightly, then turned and walked away, leaving the room filled with stunned silence. Students whispered to each other, exchanging wide-eyed looks. Some laughed nervously, unsure if they should have been listening. A few teachers shifted awkwardly, realizing they had misjudged someone purely based on appearances. The hall felt different now, quieter, as if the walls themselves had learned a lesson. Later, when the teachers gathered privately, they talked in low voices. How could we have been so wrong? One of them asked. I thought I knew everything about music here. I never imagined, another said. She plays like a professional. It's more than skill. There's emotion, control. She's extraordinary. The woman continued her work that day, moving chairs, cleaning, organizing music sheets, and doing what she always did. But the atmosphere had changed. People glanced at her differently, some with curiosity, some with admiration. She did not notice. She did not need to. Her world was her music, even if she kept it mostly silent. By the time the day ended, the incident had become the talk of the institute. Students who had been skeptical now spoke quietly about her talent. Teachers who had doubted her reconsidered every judgment they had made. The simple act of being asked to play had revealed a truth that no one could ignore. The woman left the building that evening with the same calm demeanor she had every day. The piano waited for another day, its keys still shining. She walked the streets quietly, unnoticed by most, but carrying a story that had finally begun to unfold. For years, she had lived in silence, letting the world underestimate her. Today, she had shown them a glimpse of what lay beneath, and it was enough to change their perception forever. The following day began like any other. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the institute, casting long patterns across the polished floors. Students shuffled through the hallways, carrying music books and backpacks, while teachers checked schedules and lesson plans. The woman entered quietly, her presence barely acknowledged, though today was different. Whispers followed her through the corridors, small but persistent, as if the air itself had carried news of her performance the day before. She moved with her usual grace, straightening chairs, stacking music sheets, and arranging stands for the students. Yet she felt the curious eyes on her more than usual. A few students lingered nearby, glancing at her as they passed. She noticed them but kept her focus on her work, as if she had no interest in attention. Later, during a free period, the large hall where the piano stood began to fill with a small crowd of teachers and students. News travels fast, and the woman's unexpected performance had already stirred curiosity. Some teachers wanted to see if it was a one-time miracle. Others were curious about what she might play next. The students were eager, whispering and exchanging excited glances, each trying to imagine what they were about to witness. One teacher called out to her, "Would you play again? Just something short, for us to hear." The woman paused. Her hands hovered over the keys briefly. She did not hesitate, nor did she smile. She simply approached the piano, her movements deliberate and calm. She seated herself, and the hall fell into silence, as if everyone collectively held their breath. She began with a soft, flowing melody. The notes were clear, gentle, and full of emotion. Her fingers danced effortlessly across the keys, each movement precise yet natural. The sound wrapped around the room, filling it with warmth and beauty. Students watched, wide-eyed, unable to turn away. Teachers, who had thought themselves skilled and discerning, found themselves mesmerized and silent, learning an unexpected lesson in humility. The music shifted seamlessly from soft, tender notes to powerful, bold chords. The woman's control over the instrument was absolute, yet her demeanor remained modest and composed. She played not to impress, but because the music existed within her and demanded expression. Those listening could feel the depth of her understanding, the years of study and practice, the unspoken passion that had never sought recognition. A student in the back whispered to a friend, "I had no idea. She's incredible." The friend nodded, eyes still fixed on the piano. No one could hide their astonishment. The room had become a space where skill and emotion collided, leaving awe and respect in their wake. The teachers exchanged glances, some nervously, some with growing admiration. Their earlier skepticism now seemed foolish, and the realization was quietly unsettling. They had underestimated someone purely based on her appearance, her quiet nature, her humility. The woman's music had shattered assumptions, revealing a truth they had failed to see. As the melody swelled, the atmosphere shifted. Students who had mocked or ignored her before now felt a sense of reverence. Even those who had treated her dismissively could not deny the power of her performance. It was as if she had become the center of the world, not by asserting herself, but simply by being herself and letting her talent speak. Her playing continued, moving through various tempos and styles, each one more intricate than the last. She transitioned from gentle arpeggios to rapid, precise passages, all executed with a control and sensitivity that left listeners spellbound. The music seemed to tell a story of quiet perseverance, of talent hidden away, and of patience that had waited for the right moment to be revealed. Minutes passed like seconds. The room was completely absorbed in her performance. Even the air seemed to vibrate with the resonance of her playing. She did not rush, she did not falter, and she did not seek validation. Her focus was absolute, her connection to the music undeniable. When the last note faded, the hall remained silent for a long moment. No one moved, no one spoke. The sound lingered in their minds, echoing long after the piano went quiet. Finally, a soft clap broke the silence, followed by another. Soon, the entire room was clapping, though some hesitated, unsure of how to react. The woman nodded briefly, acknowledging the appreciation without pride or show. She rose from the piano and stepped back, leaving the instrument in place. The teachers approached her, some hesitant, some clearly remorseful. One spoke first, voice low. "We misjudged you. We didn't realize. I didn't know you were capable of such skill." The woman only smiled faintly, a small, knowing gesture. She did not seek praise, nor did she ask for apologies. Her silence conveyed understanding, a quiet reminder that judgment often comes from ignorance. Students gathered in small groups, discussing what they had just witnessed. The hall was alive with conversation, but every voice carried a note of respect. Many admitted to being wrong about her, and some quietly reflected on how often appearances misled them. Throughout the day, the woman continued her work as usual. She moved through the corridors, attending to her tasks with the same calm efficiency. Yet now, she walked with a subtle sense of recognition. People who had previously ignored her gave polite nods, some even smiling with genuine warmth. She did not change her demeanor. She did not flaunt her talent. Her world remained the same, but the perception around her had shifted. By the evening, the institute was quieter. The piano stood ready for the next day, but the memory of her playing lingered in every mind. Teachers and students alike had been reminded of a simple truth. Talent is not always visible, and humility does not mean lack of skill. Some lessons are not taught in classrooms, nor are they found in textbooks. Some lessons arrive quietly, through observation, experience, and the unexpected revelation of greatness in an unlikely person. The woman left the building as she always did, walking the familiar streets with a soft calmness. She carried nothing with her except the satisfaction of having expressed herself, of letting the music speak when words were not enough. Her story was quietly unfolding, and those who had witnessed it were changed, even if only a little. The day had begun like any other, but it ended with a lesson that few would forget. Days passed since the woman's remarkable performance, and the atmosphere in the institute had shifted subtly but noticeably. Teachers moved with more caution when speaking of her. Students treated her with a newfound respect, and whispers of curiosity filled the corridors. Yet the woman continued her routine as before, quietly and diligently performing her tasks, seemingly unaware of the attention that followed her. One afternoon, a group of teachers gathered in a small office to discuss what had happened. "We need to know more about her," one said. "She didn't just play well. She played like someone who has trained for years, someone who has been on real stages. There's no way she just learned this on her own." Another teacher nodded, flipping through an old file she had found in the administrative office. "Look at this. She was once enrolled in a prestigious music academy, won several competitions, and even performed in front of large audiences. It seems life circumstances brought her here, away from the spotlight, but the skill never left." The teachers exchanged glances, some feeling guilty for the way they had treated her, others amazed by the depth of her hidden talent. Their curiosity could no longer be satisfied with mere observation. They wanted to know her story, to understand how such brilliance had remained unnoticed for so long. Meanwhile, students who had watched her perform continued to whisper among themselves. Some sought her out, timidly asking questions about the pieces she had played, hoping for advice. She responded kindly, giving short, encouraging words, but never boasting or explaining too much. Her humility remained intact, even in the face of admiration. One day, a senior teacher approached her while she was arranging chairs for a rehearsal. "Would you mind if we asked you a few questions?" he said, trying to sound casual. "About your music, your past? We're all curious." She paused for a moment, considering, then nodded gently. "I don't mind," she said quietly. They invited her into a small office, away from the corridors and students. The teacher began with simple questions, asking where she had learned to play, what inspired her, and how long she had studied. She answered with honesty, her voice calm and measured, explaining that she had trained at a top music academy, performed at various competitions, and had once dreamed of a career in music. But life had led her down a different path, bringing her here instead of onto grand stages. The teachers listened intently, slowly realizing the full depth of their misjudgment. They had assumed she was ordinary, unskilled, and unnoticed simply because she had chosen to live quietly. They had forgotten that talent and experience are not always visible, and that humility can hide greatness from the casual observer. "Why didn't you continue performing?" one teacher asked gently. She smiled softly, a hint of nostalgia in her eyes. "Life has a way of taking you in directions you don't expect," she replied. "I didn't stop because I didn't love music. I stopped because the circumstances didn't allow it. But music has never left me." Her answer resonated deeply. The teachers realized that the woman's calm demeanor and modesty were not signs of weakness, but of experience and wisdom. She had lived through challenges and chosen humility over recognition, patience over attention, and dedication over vanity. In the following days, the institute began to change in small ways. Teachers approached her differently, asking for guidance and respecting her opinions. Students watched her not only as a caretaker of the building but as a source of inspiration. The woman, however, continued her routine without fanfare. She did not demand recognition, nor did she relish the attention. Her focus remained on her work and her music. One afternoon, a young student approached her, holding a piece of sheet music. "Could you show me how to play this?" the student asked nervously. The woman nodded, taking the student to a quiet corner with a piano. She guided the student's hands over the keys, demonstrating the techniques with patience. She spoke softly, explaining the nuances of touch, rhythm, and emotion. The student watched in awe, realizing that her guidance was not only about playing the notes but about understanding the music itself. Word of her expertise continued to spread throughout the institute. More students sought her out, eager to learn not just the technical skills, but also the lessons of discipline, patience, and respect for the art. The teachers, too, found themselves returning to her for advice, humbled by the realization that they had judged her incorrectly for so long. Despite all the attention, the woman remained unchanged. She continued to rise early, clean and organize, and move quietly through the halls. Her life had returned to a rhythm she knew well, but now the rhythm carried a subtle acknowledgement from those around her. People had learned that brilliance could be hidden, that experience could be silent, and that humility did not diminish greatness. Even the piano itself seemed to respond differently when she played. It was no longer just an instrument in the hall. It had become a partner in her expression. Each note, each chord, carried not only her skill but also her history, her perseverance, and her quiet dignity. The music she created now had an added depth, a sense of story and truth that touched everyone who heard it. The revelation of her past left a lasting impression. Teachers and students alike reflected on their assumptions and biases, learning that judgment based solely on appearance or demeanor is often misleading. They began to treat others with more respect and patience, remembering the lesson she had taught simply by being herself. In the evenings, when the halls were empty, the woman would often linger by the piano, letting her fingers rest lightly on the keys. Sometimes she would play a simple melody, more for herself than anyone else. The notes seemed to carry the story of her journey, the years of training, the sacrifices, the patience, and the quiet determination. And though few were there to witness these private moments, the music remained a testament to her talent and her grace. The institute had changed subtly but profoundly. What had begun as a simple curiosity, a test of skill, had revealed a life and a talent that commanded respect. And the woman, as always, remained humble, continuing her work with quiet strength and a gentle confidence that spoke louder than any words could. The teachers had learned their lesson, the students had found a source of inspiration, and the woman herself had simply continued to be who she was, skilled, patient, and quietly extraordinary. The final days of the term at the institute were filled with a different energy than before. Students and teachers moved through the hallways with an unspoken awareness of the woman's presence. There was no fanfare, no signs or announcements. Instead, her quiet strength and talent had left an impression that required no words. She continued her routines as always, arriving early, moving silently, and performing every task with care and precision. One morning, a group of students approached her with notebooks and sheet music, hoping for guidance before their upcoming recital. She smiled gently at them, inviting them to sit near the piano. She guided their hands, demonstrating the subtleties of touch and timing. Her patience was endless, and her teaching came from experience rather than ego. The students watched, absorbing every movement and word. They were learning not just to play but to understand music, to respect it, and to appreciate the quiet discipline it required. Teachers continued to watch, some still feeling the sting of their earlier judgments. One approached her quietly during a break. "I wanted to apologize," he said softly. "We underestimated you. I didn't realize how much skill and experience you had. I hope you can forgive our assumptions." The woman only nodded gently. There was no bitterness in her eyes, no demand for acknowledgement. She had no need for apologies to feel complete. Her life and her music had always been hers, and the world around her was only beginning to understand it. The teacher left with a mix of relief and humility, realizing that true greatness often exists in silence and does not require constant validation. That afternoon, the woman was asked to sit at the piano once more. A student recital was scheduled, and the organizers wanted her to demonstrate a piece to inspire the students. She agreed, not for recognition but because she understood the importance of leading by example. As she played, the room fell into a hush. Every note, soft or powerful, carried the weight of her experience, the patience of years, and the quiet elegance of someone who had chosen dedication over attention. The students were mesmerized. Many had never seen such skill displayed with such humility. The teachers watched in awe, some taking notes, some simply reflecting on how often they had misjudged others based on appearances or demeanor. The performance was not a show of pride. It was a lesson, an expression of beauty and truth that needed no applause. After the recital, small groups of students gathered around her, asking questions and seeking guidance. She responded with calm patience, offering insights into both technique and feeling. She emphasized listening, understanding, and practicing with intention. Her words carried the weight of experience but the gentleness of someone who had learned humility from life itself. Over the next few days, the institute seemed transformed. Students approached their practice with renewed focus and respect. Teachers spoke more kindly, considering their words before speaking, and reflecting on the assumptions they had made in the past. The woman's presence had quietly shifted the culture of the place. It was no longer just a building of lessons and schedules. It had become a space where patience, respect, and true talent were recognized and nurtured. The woman herself remained unchanged. She continued her routines, her focus on her work and her music, without seeking attention or acknowledgement. The piano, now a familiar companion, waited each day as she passed by, silent but aware of the hands that could bring it to life. Even in quiet moments, she would sometimes linger, allowing her fingers to hover over the keys, producing gentle, thoughtful melodies that filled the hall with warmth. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the corridors, a teacher approached her once more. "I've learned something important from you," he said quietly. "It's not just about music. It's about humility, patience, and understanding others before judging them. Thank you for showing us that." She nodded with a faint smile, the kind that conveys understanding without arrogance. Her lessons were not only in music but in life itself. Every action she took, every note she played, was a testament to the quiet strength of a person who had lived fully, yet without seeking recognition. As the term ended, students prepared for final recitals, teachers organized lessons, and the halls gradually emptied of daily activity. Yet the impact of the woman's presence remained. Those who had witnessed her talent and humility carried the memory with them. They had been reminded that true skill and character are often hidden, revealed only to those patient enough to notice. The woman continued her daily walk home after her final tasks, the same quiet path she had always taken. She walked slowly, observing the world around her without expectation, content in the knowledge that her music and her integrity had spoken louder than words could ever convey. The world might not always recognize such talent immediately, she knew, but it had a way of revealing itself at the right time. Her story, simple yet profound, had left a mark on everyone at the institute. Teachers and students alike learned a lesson in respect, patience, and humility. The woman had not sought fame or praise, but she had taught them more than any classroom lesson could. She had shown that true greatness is not in recognition or applause, but in quiet dedication, mastery, and the courage to let one's abilities shine when the moment calls for it. And so, the institute returned to its usual rhythm, but it carried with it a changed understanding. The woman remained humble, diligent, and calm, walking the same halls, performing the same tasks, yet now seen through new eyes. Her music, her presence, and her quiet example had transformed the people around her, leaving a lasting impact that would be remembered long after the halls had emptied and the piano had fallen silent. The story of the humble woman who was a piano virtuoso had reached its conclusion, but the lesson it carried would continue to resonate for years to come.